reflection of the disdain and the disregard they have for the Ghanaian people. I mean, how can you choose the IMF over the people who have employed you, over your employers, over the people you are supposed to serve? It's the height of disrespect.
I am disrespected. I am offended that he will send the watchman, the gate man, the security man, to come and receive a petition on monetary policy. He says he's a retired wing commander. For a wing commander, his business is flying planes. I mean, what has a wing commander got to do with monetary policy and inflation rates? But you see, this is a good indication of where we are. He has called for war. He will get it big time.
We all feel very much disrespected. And this speaks to the impunity with which Nana Akufo-Addo and his appointees want to run this country. But we are not handing over our petition to the head of security. It's like somebody wanting to present a petition to Parliament, to the Speaker of Parliament, and the Speaker delegates the Marshal of the head of security of Parliament to come and receive it. It's the height of disrespect.
I feel very disrespected as the leader of the opposition in Parliament for a simple reason that we demanded to present a petition to the Governor of the Central Bank of the Republic of Ghana, otherwise known as the Bank of Ghana. Unfortunately, he has decided to disrespect us, and his two deputies has also decided to disrespect us by not being here and to receive our petition. We never said we are going to present our petition to the head of security or someone responsible for security, with all due respect. The crowd you've seen is just the beginning. We will come back again, and I assure you, trust me, we will come back again. He should better come in here. If he thinks that the IMF is more important than the Parliament of Ghana, if he thinks that the IMF is more important than the people of Ghana, he's here because of the people of Ghana and not IMF. So let him deal with IMF, but we'll come after him. We will come after him.
Thank you.
Until we see him, we are not stopping. This is just the beginning. A lot more.
Right. So, for those of you who didn't get the opportunity to follow, we just decided to give you, a bit of, a picture of how the streets looked like. But I'm sure many of you have seen footages that show you the actual size of the demonstration on that day. Thousands just went out there, and there was great luck, even though police was trying to ensure that there was free flow of traffic and everything else. Let me welcome my guest. Doing this first segment of the discussion here in the studio is Inu Safuseni, former Minister, Lands and Natural Resources. He is also a lawyer. He's a minister in different portfolios. And very recently, he went to the rescue of demonstrators at the police station, just by hearing on radio that they were in difficult circumstance. Also, Professor Godfred Bokwe is Professor of Finance and Economics, University of Ghana, joining us for that discussion as well. Prof, thank you very much, and Honorable, thank you for making time to join us.
Thank you, Samson.
Great. So let's begin, because you were on the ground. Let's begin by finding out how you felt. I was following intermittently and then watching you give interviews, how you were excited to be there. I saw these young men who mobbed you. In one of the interviews, they were all over you. Some of them had their arms over you. You're getting old. You shouldn't be getting in there.
Yes, something. So first of all, I think that I need to thank you so very much for your position on Article 1, which was the prelude. Which is the prelude to this discussion. When people fail to recognize that the power of government resides in the people.
The ultimate power.
The ultimate power. The ultimate power. And that power must be exercised for the benefit of the people. And until we begin understanding these hallowed words in the Constitution, probably we will always think that we are secondary citizens in this country. So I thank you so very much. I was actually moved.
The citizens are careful. They know how they can see things that look discriminatory, even though the Constitution says they are not to be discriminated against. They've seen big people, quote unquote, people with status, class, so to speak, who get into the biggest troubles. And even when they go to court, they come out unscathed. Okay? They've seen people who insult judges. They berate judges. They insult them in a manner that nobody would even think about doing. And they get away with contempt. And they see that when they do the slightest thing and they are put before a court, they will suffer many years in jail. Some of them actually pre-trial detention. Nobody thinks about them. So they are aware. People who have threatened war and say, this tribe, if you see this other tribe, hit them, beat them up. They are put before a court and they are free. But if the ordinary person attempted a quarter of that, they will still be in jail. So people...
So we as lawyers and once upon a time law students, we've always discussed this matters in jurisprudence, not so. Is law meeting its ultimate objective and purpose? How can we make law more effective, efficient, and representative of the people? How can law be a tool for safeguarding the weak in society? We've always discussed these things. But my honest view is that it is not the trampled upon, the marginalized, the weak, who will fight for the recognition of that right. It is people like you and me who have been privileged, who probably have been educated by the resources of the marginalized, who will stand up and speak. And the Ghana anthem, our anthem, says that God should imbue in us, put in us the love or make it possible for us to cherish fearless honesty. Fearless honesty.
I love that line to bits.
Why? Because you must be fearless to talk about matters that clearly will inure to the benefit of the generality. And you must be prepared for the consequences. And that national anthem predates the 1992 Constitution.
So I was saying that you have served your country. I do not expect you at this time when you are supposed to enjoy some amount of rest, good rest, to be on the streets.
Yes. So sometimes I can relate. I can actually relate to the young man. Me and you come from areas that were not very endowed. The fact that we are here speaking to Ghanaians means either our family invested in us or the communities invested in us. But there are people still in the communities, not so. The motto of the Commonwealth Hall of the University of Ghana is
True stance.
True stance. No, the Legon Hall.
Okay.
Hall. To whom much is given, much is expected. I mean, can you imagine all the privileges we have enjoyed growing up? The fact that you could go to your uncle and say you're going to school and they will give you money to go to school.
Yeah.
Your uncle has grown and gotten children. Does your responsibility to your uncle end with your uncle? are you not responsible for the children? And if they are growing up and the country in which we are managed in a way as to compromise their future, don't you have an intergenerational responsibility to ensure that your actions now will create a better future for them? Aren't we? How is human progress recorded? You have children. You pray and hope that even though you've achieved national stardom, your children will achieve African stardom or world stardom. That's how progress is recorded. You can't hope to be better than your children. Then that's retardation. So yes, I've been given tremendous privileges to serve this country, but I still can relate to the pain and suffering of the youth. And I told you 2 weeks or so ago that I had a stirring in me that what the young men came out to do was right and legitimate, and that no action should be taken to frustrate them. They should be allowed to talk about how they see things and whether the way things are going would better their lives in accordance with Article 1 of the Constitution. The same consideration animated my thought when the NDC, together with civil society organizations, decided to embark on a demonstration. Yes, I'm NDC. But what is the demonstration about? It's about recklessness.
We'll talk about what the demonstration is about, the purpose. But that is supposed to be hooliganism on the part of members of parliament, legislators, representatives of the people in parliament who have other civilized avenues to vent the same, plaint.
Well, that statement from Addison has been condemned by all right-thinking people, right-minded people. Because you see, we all know, and your listeners know, that the demonstration was made possible by Article 21 of the Constitution.
Article 21, 1D.
D of the Constitution.
Right.
Now, and so that is a legitimate basis for the demonstration. And we all know that Article 33, even if Article 21 was not in the Constitution, Article 33...
Article 21, 1D of the Constitution 1992 is about general fundamental freedoms. 1D says all persons shall have the right to freedom of assembly, including freedom to take part in processions and demonstrations. Please go ahead.
So that was the basis of that. Now, to say that that's hooliganism is to challenge the premise upon which that right has been granted to Ghanaians.
Guaranteed to Ghanaians.
Guaranteed, actually. Thank you. So again, you have bring me back to the philosophical discussions that animated the halls of University of Ghana. Well, so guaranteed. It's guaranteed. So it's a recognition that that right must exist, and the Constitution guarantees that. So to say that that's hooliganism is to attack Article 21 of the Constitution, Article 21 1D of the Constitution. And there is a way of attacking provisions of the Constitution. You sponsor an amendment to change it. That's what you do. I mean, if you don't sponsor an amendment to change it, that provision becomes part of the worldview that Ghanaians, our founding fathers, thought that the people of Ghana should be guaranteed those rights. Now, two, let's look at the de facto reality. From the Obra Square to the intersection between the courts and the Ghana lotteries and Shiraj, where we ended the demonstration, there was not a single incident of lawlessness. In fact, the leaders of the demonstration were at pains to calm down the restless youth who thought we should defy the police. And Samson, I was there, and I can tell you, all through the march, there were decisions taken by the police on the spot of the moment. Whereas they had agreed earlier that some routes could be taken, on the day of the demonstration, they changed them. But the demonstrators acceded to that. Because we not only are Ghanaian citizens who are interested in the betterment of the country, but we also are respectful, lawful, or law-abiding citizens of this country. And so, when we got there to the opposite Ghana lotteries, we had expected to see the governor of the Bank of Ghana behind the police cordon to receive the petition. We were only told that we should elect some representatives of the demonstration to go and meet Addison. And everybody knows what turns out. But to say that for Addison to be ensconced in his office, to say the things he said, smacks of extreme level of arrogance, or a failure to understand his duty to the people of Ghana. I choose my words carefully. To the people of Ghana, not to government. Addison has been somebody who's gone through the educational system, has invested in himself. He's worked at the international level. He knows about fidelity to the law. He knows. There cannot be justification for a breach of the law unless those justifications are provided in the criminal code or in Criminal or Other Offences Act, now so called. Now, is it justification to steal your neighbor's property on the basis of the fact that you are hungry? Is it justification? Or is it justification for an ambulance conveying a sick person to the hospital who needs medical care, knock down somebody at the traffic lights? Is it justification? And so, fidelity to the law is always very important in discharging your duties as a public officer.
He says, I won't resign.
Well, so
that's the purpose.
I agree
that he should resign, his deputy should resign. He says, I won't.
Yeah, so I agree that I already anticipated that he will say he won't resign. And I know the president will not sack him because the president hasn't got that history. So even in situations where the president would have sacked, he's advised those people to resign.
You mean the president will not demand his resignation,
He'll not
sack, because the president doesn't have the power to remove him?
The president doesn't have the power to
There's a process.
It's a process.
That must be gone through.
The president can initiate the process. You get it? The president can initiate the... Why did they give the Bank of Ghana operational independence? Again, this question that you have asked is very important. And so, you look at the web, and you see clearly that probably there's something wrong with our governor.
I know that when political leadership doesn't want you as a governor, if they don't want you to stay a minute or a day in that bank, they can do it.
They can do it.
In the same way we see when power changes, the swiftness with which the new government or new leadership is able to remove governance of the bank. But you know that the president does not, in the letter and spirit of the law, the president cannot get up today and write a letter and say, get out of that office.
Oh, the president will not do that. Because
he can't do that because the law does not allow it.
If he does, or the president has done other things other than that. But if he does that, it will be an egregious violation of or breach of the status of establishing the Bank of Ghana. Now, sometimes there are what we call gray areas in the law. The president can exploit those gray areas. The president could not have sacked the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Charlotte Osei, your client. But there was a way.
So she was not my client.
Who was the client?
I took a constitutional interpretive issue.
Oh, she was going to be a beneficiary of that.
Acting as she would have been a beneficiary of that suit, but she was not my client.
Okay, she didn't pay.
Kokubako.
Kokubako was the client. Okay, so you see, he didn't take a direct route to sacking Charlotte Osei. But Charlotte Osei, the end result was that Charlotte Osei had to go. Okay. The president has since received numerous petitions from Ghanaians. And you have said consistently that a violation of the constitution that demands the declaration of assets within a certain period of time cannot be excusable. That those public officers who have done that should go. And I share that with you. But they have not gone. So there are many things that the president can do, and there are gray areas. So he will not go. The president will not initiate any move or get people to initiate moves to let him go. The president, in fact, why the president will not let him go? I mean, once upon a time there was a governor of the Bank of Ghana. He had not stayed through his term. He was called one Dr. Abdul Nasser Isahako. When the MPP won election 2016, in 2017 they came to the conclusion that they could not work with him. The late Osei Akoto in Parliament, in one of our discussions, said, "Oh, no, sir, we can't work with him. We can't work with him. So we're going to pay him his severance award and he will go. We can't work with him." So, but we have known that in the United States of America, the head of the Treasury, or what was his name, lived through many administrations for consistency in policy. But why did the president say he could not, or the government said they could not work with? Because of what has happened. You need somebody who will put partisanship over national service or patriotism or the duty to his law or to the law establishing his institution to be able to bend the rules in your favor and do so with impunity. I have said that when you look at what happened at the Bank of Ghana, and particularly, and many people have said, well, and even yesterday, somebody was still arguing that, oh, we need to celebrate him. We're not saying that we won't celebrate him. We're saying that we will celebrate him when he does the things properly. You know that if a law says that you cannot do certain things, and you want to do those things, what you must do is to take steps to amend that law.
Right. So let's not go back there. Finally to you, and then I'll go to my other guests. By the constitutional architecture, the Bank of Ghana governor has legal protections.
Yeah.
Just like a judge of the Superior Court, just like the commissioners of the independent constitutional bodies. So, once you are convinced that the president first cannot remove him, is the reason you are appealing to him to resign or demanding that he resigns. He says, I will not resign. As we understand, you are planning to have not one or perhaps even more of these demonstrations for the same purpose. Will he not be justified to say, You know that there are civilized processes that you can use, and yet you are embarking on this hooliganism.
I don't want you to go to that route, because the Constitution itself guarantees the right to demonstrate. And we cannot say that the Constitution haven't guaranteed the right to demonstrate. Our country is an uncivilized country. That argument cannot hold. I mean, you can come to a deductive conclusion on the basis of that argument. Two, our Constitution has similar provisions in other jurisdictions. But those jurisdictions, more established democracies as they are, people still manifest civil disobedience and demonstrate.
Even spontaneously.
No, spontaneously.
You don't need this 5 days notice.
Even coming to you today, I was just thinking that, how can you call that demonstration lawless? And I saw you posted unlawful assembly. Then I said, oh, then we are in trouble. Because when churches go on retreat, do they take permission from the police? So if your church goes on retreat and they are praying, and another church comes there and says that premises that you are occupying or that plot of land that you are on saying your prayers is my plot of land and I won't allow you, that assembly now has the potential of degenerating into violence. Does it immediately change into unlawful assembly? Does it? And well, let's come back. So there are many jurisprudential questions that we can ask.
Okay.
But because we are exploring this and trying to expand the frontiers of law, let's say that, and all agree, that demonstrations, and I said it 2 weeks ago, are very important in advancing our democracy.
Our Supreme Court has confirmed that when the NPP in 1993 took up a suit challenging the question of permission to demonstrate, which has led to a new law. Because the Supreme Court pronounced that
you don't require
it is unlawful to require the demonstrator to seek permission before they demonstrate. In that matter, the Supreme Court recognized that this is not only our fundamental human rights to demonstrate and assembly, it's not only inalienable, it's not only our birthright, and it's not only guaranteed by Ghana's constitution, but it's guaranteed by the African Charter, it's guaranteed by UN, other instruments, and so on and so forth. So it's not only in Ghana's laws that you find this. Let me go to Professor Bokwing. Prof, we are going to ask you to help us with whether it is justified because of the demands that they make, the reasons that inspire the demonstration. But before that, briefly, what's your comment about this demonstration in the first place? Remember when they wanted to start, the police went to court and said this is a security zone. They mentioned that there are terrorism activities. They mentioned coups going on, and for fear of all of these things, they didn't want the court to allow it. Eventually, it's been allowed. People have asked questions, very basic issues, because right at that place, you have the courts there. So even if you gave them the routes to pass and they are using the courts area and all, the courts, they are not security places. Yes, what do you say?
Thompson, thank you. Good morning. Good morning to our co-panelists and our listeners. I'm not so much of an expert in these areas, demonstration, the rest of them. It appears that I understand GDP much better than the way people should demonstrate. But I think I've learned a lot listening to Honorable this morning. My considered view is that if you look at the whole architecture, from the judiciary to the security services and all of that, it doesn't appear that we are working consciously towards deepening our democracy in a manner that perhaps we've seen elsewhere. Okay, and therefore, and part of this also is the fact that, and you also see it playing out with the way Bank of Ghana has been behaving. that there's a certain submissiveness to the political party in power or the government in power, much to the detriment of the common good. And therefore, even if demonstrations are legitimately premised, have very good reasons and whatever, and probably could lead to a good outcome, it appears that for the sake of allegiance to government or whatever, we tend to tamper with that. I had said before that in a very serious country, maybe the governor of Bank of Ghana would have resigned long ago. It doesn't have to take a demonstration. And because, so if you look at, and I'm saying this because something over the years or over the decades, in fact, since 1992, part of the macroeconomic instability we have seen in this country has largely also been supported by the central bank through accommodating monetary stand, which ultimately enables the political economy or the fiscal side to actually be reckless. To that extent, the checks and balances that one would have expected to come from the central bank. And it's for this reason that over the years, as a country, we've worked hard to generate the operational independence of the central bank. And I want to believe that the central bank, the Supreme Court would equally affirm the operational independence of the central bank, because as a horizontal accountability institution, is good for our democracy. And therefore, whoever presides over the affairs of the central bank would have to be mindful of the fact that they are there first to protect the institutional independence. Under this circumstance, we've seen Bank of Ghana not playing that role effectively. I could give you a little bit of statistics just to put this within context, so that as we reform going forward, we build forward better. Because what we are discussing here is not peculiar to only this regime. I've said that time and again, just to give context, except to say that the level and the magnitude of the deficit financing and the debt financing by the central bank is unprecedented and shouldn't have reached that level also. We can debate that. And I think it's from that perspective that one could reasonably conclude that the performance of the central bank was suboptimal.
The demonstrators repeated to us the bank cleanup, or what others prefer to call bank collapse circumstances. They repeated to us and said, look, these are guys who have spent in excess of, 27 billion of our hard-earned money doing something that didn't work. Microfinance companies, Atuforsen refers to them that they were targeted. According to what he had to say, he said these companies were targeted and collapsed by these leaders. 426 microfinance companies, he said, linked to the NDC were collapsed under this thing. And that the expenditure we made is part of the reason our economy couldn't take the shock when the world began to suffer some of the problems that it suffered. Some of you, the experts, were on our platforms explaining to the citizens why these measures were good measures. So are there reasons, the best reasons for the demonstration, before we come to the loss and the headquarters building?
Yeah, something. This is an interesting question. I had held a view before, and I still stand by that, that the financial sector cleanup was necessary. And had maintained, even on this platform before, that the vulnerabilities that crystallized towards the end of 2016, running to 2017, which occasioned the financial sector cleanup, had started way back towards the end of 2011. The data is clear. Non-performing loans and all of that. We had maintained that the first asset quality review that was done 2015 clearly had indicated vulnerabilities in the financial sector. The decisive responsiveness didn't come the way it should. You can go through the IMF supported programs, the 16th IMF supported program from April 3rd, 2015 to April 2019. That is clear. So we were of the view, and I supported the central bank, that a certain level of cleanup needed to be done in order to reposition the financial sector to make it a bit more robust to support economic growth. That's clear. However, we have also said that given the amount of money that had been spent and the lack of transparency in the financial sector, cleanup raises questions. And we have maintained that this should independently be investigated. That it cannot be that we didn't, Bank of Ghana should have presented overall plan and how much it was going to cost the ordinary Ghanaian. Transparency, full disclosure. We saw what happened in the case of the US in the run-up in the financial sector cleanup, the global financial crisis, the relationship between the US Fed, Congress, and all of that. That should not be lost on us. And I think that, yes, if you look at how much we have spent, the lack of disclosure and transparency and all of that, clearly it raises questions about the financial sector cleanup. We will not run away from that now. And we've made that known. And I want to believe that, and also, you see, there are other things that are coming up now that wasn't visibly maybe available then in terms of politically connected businesses or financial institutions within the sector and how they were treated relative to others and the rest of them. I think we should all be bold enough to say we shouldn't have gone that way. That businesses should be allowed to thrive regardless of which regime is in power. I think that is very clear. And I think we are not running away from that. I think, and the fact that we also supported the financial sector cleanup, yes, but the form and the ultimate cost to the Ghanaian certainly raises questions. And we've made that known long ago.
Right. So if we move away from that point that that expenditure of 27, now we hear sometimes going to about 30 billion, which we have instituted a levy that I don't know how much of that levy can repay that money. If we move from there, and the fact that led to weakening, if you like, call it the economic shock absorbers. And because of that, when the world situation came, we became so vulnerable, and that's why we are feeling it the way we feel. They are saying, and they have explained, that the historic loss that has been made at the Bank of Ghana, I've forgotten what the percentage is, you clearly should have it at your fingertip, was expenditure
60.8 billion cedis.
That the chunk of the expenditure went to the DDEP, which is for us to help a recovery, to help recover the economy. So on that basis, will you say that such a demand is justified, that he and his governor should resign?
I think the explanation of Bank of Ghana doesn't stand. I take exception to that. This is how I'm looking at it. We had crisis. Of course, before COVID-19, before Russia-Ukraine, there was clear evidence that the country's fiscal vulnerability was very high. It was clear. Just to give context, Ghana officially entered a high-risk debt distress category in 2014. As part of so when the government in 2014, actually it was on August 6, 2014, when the government made a call to the IMF for our 16th IMF-supported program, which kicked in from April 3, 2015 to April 2019. One of the drivers was debt unsustainability. So the IMF-supported program then had, as part of the objectives, to restore debt sustainability, among other objectives. When we exited that IMF-supported program in 2019, we still could not achieve debt sustainability. We were still a high risk of debt distress as a medium debt carrying country. We were still at that point. Now, from the end of 2019, internal debt sustainability analysis done by Ministry of Finance itself had similar conclusion that our public debt was unsustainable, even before COVID, even before Russia-Ukraine. So the pre-existing vulnerabilities were there. Great. COVID came, and in the wisdom of Parliament, they felt the need to suspend the Fiscal Responsibility Act because the Act had imposed a limit in terms of the level of fiscal deficit that could be created at 5% of GDP. Now, Bank of Ghana, my considered view, I'm not a lawyer, is that could not have used the mere suspension of the Fiscal Responsibility Act as a basis to disregard its own act that imposed a limit on deficit financing to the tune of 5% of government's previous year's fiscal revenue. I don't think so. And that is why I say that that explanation from the central bank cannot be appropriately placed in here. Now, the reason I'm saying so, hello?
Go ahead. I need us to wrap up. Yeah.
So I'm not a lawyer, but that's how I see it, because there's a reason why the 5% limit is in there. If you want to go beyond that, there is an escape route. It's not like there is no other way. The lack of transparency, the lack of disclosure surrounding this whole deficit financing, even at a time when it was largely a public information that the central bank was printing money, financing the deficit, this was denied.
But Prof,
the way we have designed our central
but Prof, when Dr. Kaysel Ato-Forson says they have printed money to the tune of 770 trillion in 2 years, is that fact?
No, I'm not too sure the minority leader was talking about 700 trillion because probably, I know that the deficit financing or net claims on the government, including overdraft and the rest of them, as at the end of 2022, was 77.6 billion cedis.
So billion, not trillion.
Yes, okay. 77.6 billion cedis. That was the amount. If you express this as a percentage of government previous year's total fiscal revenue, that was way in excess of the 5% limit.
Okay.
But something, this is a real issue. And why, and I think Honorable in your studio also talked about that, why politicians would almost always prefer somebody they can manipulate to be at the central bank. Something, look at it this way. Between 2008 and then 2012, the level of deficit financing by our central bank went up by more than 600%. In 2012, which was an election year. The level of deficit financing, at that time, the Bank of Ghana Act only allowed 10%. And this 10% is what has been reduced to 5%, even though under an IMF arrangement, we brought ourselves to zero financing. The level of financing, according to our current vice president, when he was in opposition, was more than 45% in 2012, when the limit was 10%. In 2013, the level of deficit financing was around 36%, when it was supposed to be 10%. Now, it was this that created the inflationary pressures and the debt-induced macroeconomic instability that took us to the 16th IMF supported program. The response of the IMF was that, given the deficit financing, the unexpected inflationary expectations could no longer be unexpected. So one of the program objectives was to eliminate the fiscal dominance of monetary policy. We went through that.
Okay.
We are back to the same point now, right? Now, if you look at what we are talking about here, the level of the deficit financing is unprecedented. So much to the extent that we have actually reduced the balance sheet of the central bank to nothing, a huge negative. Look, we should bear in mind that when the central bank's balance sheet is rendered worthless, the way we see it here, it undermines the moral legitimacy of the central bank in monetary policy conduct and regulation. It also signals to the market that the central bank, in its attempt to claw back, would likely be aggressive with fines, and with a little infraction, you'll be imposed with fines, because the central bank needs to make money to repair its balance sheet.
Okay. Prof, thank you very much for your time. Just in 30 seconds before you leave us, what will change if these officers were left the bank?
Well, it is my considered view that there should be consequences. Otherwise, as a country, we can't move forward. There should be consequences. What we are talking about here is unprecedented, and I think that I've given you data across the two main.
It's unprecedented in extraordinary world economic situations. No, that's what they are telling you.
You can see relativity. You can see marginality. It should not be the case that we are in this solely because of the external shocks.
Okay.
You can check Ghana's inflation across other countries. You can check the public debt data. You can check level of financing across even our peers and the rest of them. So it's a very lazy way of saying that everything is external. No.
All right.
We also don't discount the external impact. But let's accept responsibility, and let's make amends in a way that inures to the benefit of the ordinary Ghanaian.
Thank you very much, Professor Godfrey Bokwing. There, I can only give you some 2 minutes, and then we take a break and come to look at something that has both positive. The education minister suggests there's actually no negative, so we should not be worried. That in 1 year, 10,000 teachers trained with our hard-earned money. You know how we sacrifice to take care of our teachers and to train them. They have left. They are in the UK. But the fact that the UK is looking for Ghanaian teachers is credit to what we are doing down here, isn't it? Yes.
Well, so when Professor Bokwing was speaking, my mind immediately went to the phrase or word that came up during the COVID. Comorbidities. And that is what has gotten Ghana to where we are now. That's gotten Ghana bankrupt. It says that there were already pre-existing vulnerabilities. Deficit was high, debt unsustainable, inflation was high. Then COVID comes. Then Ukraine-Russia comes. It collapses you totally. But one thing that we must all know is that we cannot accept the explanation given by government and the Bank of Ghana, because we are living in a global community. And that's where the relativity plays in. So how come that Africa is not suffering the same? Or how come that East Asian countries are not suffering the same? Or Latin American countries? And only those who have failed in Latin American countries or in East Asian countries to manage their economies properly, like Sri Lanka, are going through the same problems with us. So that is the problem. But lastly, Samson, again coming back to your Article 1, because power resides with us, the least we expect of public office holders is absolute honesty, brutal honesty, and taking responsibility for their actions. Now, if you take a decision and the decision does not pan out well, as a public officer, you not only have to engage with the people of Ghana in honest talk, you also have to accept responsibility. I think that in this case,
We don't have that culture.
we don't have that culture. That's why we are where we are. We are always struggling to defend the indefensible. That is the problem. And you find it in political parties. Sometimes when you speak out of turn, your party even condemns you. But you must be honest.
I'll confess to you, the most worrying part of that is where you see intellectuals that you had so much respect for, that you actually went down there and supported demonstrations that they organized over minor issues. And you see them defend, they're completely indefensible. It's difficult. And let's see how it goes. But you not presenting your petition to the head of security has also come up for discussion. But since you say you go back again, let's see what happens.
But Spencer, you know that the Constitution categorizes officials at the Bank of Ghana or at any public institution. We have principal officers and other officers. Is the head of security part of the principal officers of the bank?
We understand he reports directly to the government.
Is he part of the principal officers? No, not.
Okay. And on that note, if you have heard anybody suggest, particularly Paul Admochire suggest that Samson has written somewhere that demeaning comments that was a watchman, please treat it with a bag of salt. I have not said that anywhere, and I have not written it anywhere. He purported to quote me twice on his show on Tuesday and on Thursday, and trying to, throw mud at me on his show. It's completely wrong. I have said no such thing anywhere. My father, in the last 10, 15 years of his life, was a watchman, and I was proud of him.